Hey, what's up, everyone? I dug up two of the haunting Reddit confessions on the internet for you. Drop a like and subscribe if you want more. Let's get into it. My great aunt left me her house, but her will forbids me from opening the basement. 30M. Posted 3 days ago on r/no sleep by Nats Throwaway 61. So my great aunt Vivian died 6 weeks ago. We were not super close. She lived alone out in rural Vermont, one of those women the family just sort of talked around at holidays. But she sent me a birthday card every single year without fail. And when I was 22, she helped me book my first solo trip to Portugal. That meant something. I am Natalie, 30, male, work as a travel advisor. I live in an apartment with my dog Coda, and that is about the extent of my world right now. 3 weeks after Vivian passed, I got a call from her estate lawyer, a guy named Mr. Halloran. She left me the house, the whole thing. But the will had one binding clause. The basement must remain permanently sealed. Not please keep it closed, legally binding. The only key to the basement door was supposedly cremated with her ashes. Halloran said it like that should settle things. I drove up on a Saturday to handle the paperwork and start cleaning the place out. The house was old, but solid, smelled like lavender and dust. I found the basement door halfway down the kitchen hallway and stopped cold. There was a padlock on it, brand new. Shiny brass, hardware store price sticker still stuck to the side. This lock was installed weeks before she died. I called Halloran. He told me to ignore it, honor the will. But I was standing alone in a dead woman's house staring at a lock she bought while she was dying. I found bolt cutters in the garden shed, cut the lock off, pulled the door open. The stairs went down into pitch dark. I turned on my phone flashlight and went down. Every single inch of the basement walls was covered in handwriting, floor to ceiling, decades of cramped journal entries written directly onto the concrete in pen and marker. The oldest entries near the ceiling, faded, barely legible, matched Vivian's handwriting perfectly. They described raising a child no one in my family has ever mentioned, not once, not ever. There was no record of this child anywhere. He kept reading. I stood there for I do not know how long. Phone flashlight aimed at the walls, neck craned back trying to read the oldest entries up near the ceiling. Those were dated mid-1990s. The handwriting was neat, careful, unmistakably Vivian's, and the tone was gentle. Feeding schedules, notes about first words. The little one said, "More today." Small milestones written down the way a mother would. But there was never a name, not once. It was always the little one or my responsibility. I started photographing everything, wall by wall, section by section. As the dates moved forward, the entries changed. Around 2003, the tenderness dropped out completely. Vivian wrote about difficulty, about the child refusing to stay quiet when visitors came upstairs. There were references to the arrangement and what the family decided, like those were formal terms everyone had agreed to. The handwriting got worse over the years. Entries spaced further apart. Some sections were scratched out so hard the concrete underneath was gouged. Then I found a cluster near the far wall where the same phrase was written over and over, maybe 30 times. This is mercy. This is mercy. This is mercy. I went upstairs and called my cousin Derek. He is the only family I still talk to. I told him what I found and he got quiet for a long time. He said he vaguely remembered Vivian being odd about the house, that she never let anyone pass the kitchen. But a child? No, he had never heard anything about a child. He told me to leave it alone, said some family stuff is buried for a reason. I could not leave it alone. I went back down with a portable charger and started reading chronologically from the earliest entries I could reach. The child grew. The entries tracked years. Birthdays passed. Seasons changed in the writing. Mentions of cold concrete, hot summers when the air got thick. But one thing never changed across any of it. The child never left that basement. Not once. Vivian kept someone down there for decades. Decades on concrete. Written in pen where no one would ever look. Then he looked past the walls. Once I stopped reading and actually looked at the basement itself, it got worse. There was a mattress impression on the concrete floor. Not a mattress, just the stain and the compressed shape where one had been for so long it left a permanent mark. A rusted bucket sat in the far corner, and near the base of the stairs, grooves were worn into the concrete in a short arc. Pacing marks. Someone had walked the same path so many times they carved it into the floor. The walls were not just a journal, they were the only outlet this person ever had. I made myself keep reading. The entries from around 2012 through 2018 were different from everything before them. The handwriting was adult, fully formed. The person writing was not a child anymore. They wrote about hearing the television upstairs, counting Vivian's footsteps to know what room she was in. They knew the seasons by how the concrete felt. Cold meant winter, sticky meant August. One entry stopped me completely. It described hearing a heavy thud upstairs, then nothing. 2 days of silence. Then Vivian's voice again, weaker. She had fallen and no one came. The person in the basement heard it all and could do nothing. I was shaking when I called Mr. Halloran again. I told him what I found and pressed him hard. He got very quiet, then said, "The will is the will." He told me to seal the door and walk away. I told him someone lived down there. He said, "Natalie, I am advising you as your attorney to honor the terms of the estate." I hung up on him. That night I sat in Vivian's kitchen with every light on. My car was packed. I could have driven home, but I kept staring down that hallway at the open basement door and I could not make myself leave. The comments did not hold back. Vermont Gothic. A 30-year retainer to keep a basement sealed after death. That lawyer knew exactly what he was protecting and he still cashed the checks. Blank envelope. The fact that the DNA came back as a close biological relative is the part that should terrify you. That is not a stranger Vivian grabbed. That is family she erased. Insomnia Chef. Has anyone considered that the person might have left the basement long before Natalie even got there? The inspector opened it during the property assessment. If someone walked out then, they have had weeks of head start. That is exactly what the detective said. The inspector's report from the property assessment mentions the padlock was already cut when he arrived. He assumed the estate company did it. They assumed he did it. Nobody actually cut it. Someone on the inside broke it open. The timeline means whoever was in that basement walked out at least 11 days before I ever set foot in that house. 4 days later, Natalie posted an update. I read what was written on the basement walls. I went back with a proper lamp, one of those construction work lights you can stand on the floor and angle. I spent the better part of 2 days reading every entry on every wall, following the timeline from ceiling to floor. The most recent section was near the bottom of the south wall, dated just weeks before Vivian died, and the handwriting changed completely. It was not Vivian's anymore. This new hand was shakier, less practiced, like someone who had not written much in their life but had watched someone else do it for years. The final entries described hearing Vivian coughing upstairs for days straight. Then unfamiliar voices, strangers moving through the house. Those would have been the hospice workers. Then nothing. Silence for what the entries count as 9 days. The very last thing written on those walls was near the floor, in letters much larger than anything else down there. She promised I could leave when she died. She lied. The lawyer has the same instructions. I drove straight to Mr. Halloran's office, did not call ahead, walked in and read that line to his face. He went pale. His hands were flat on the desk, and I watched his fingers press down until the knuckles went white. He asked me how I got into the basement. I told him it did not matter. I asked him who was down there. He said he could not discuss the details of the estate beyond what was disclosed in the will. I told him a person was kept in that basement, and his legal arrangement helped keep them there. He said nothing, just sat there with his jaw tight, staring at a point somewhere past my shoulder. Dismal oracle. The handwriting changing is what got me. Vivian stopped writing, and someone else just picked up where she left off like it was routine, like they had been watching her do it for years. Raccoon divorce. I keep thinking about the phrase, "the lawyer has the same instructions." That means Vivian built a system. She planned for her own death and still wanted that person locked in. Blank envelope. What disturbs me is that the lawyer did not even question it. 30 years of retainer payments, and he just filed it under client confidentiality. The legal system literally helped maintain a cage. He called the police. I turned everything over. The photos, the timeline, all of it. Police came out to the house within hours. They confirmed someone had lived in that basement until very recently. They found food wrappers stuffed behind a loose section of drywall near the stairs. the mattress impression, hair samples caught in a crack where the wall meets the floor. But no person. Whoever had been down there was gone. Mr. Halloran was brought in for questioning. He admitted that Vivian had paid a 30-year retainer specifically to maintain what he called the arrangement after her death. His job was to ensure the basement clause in the will was honored by any future owner of the property. He claims he never once visited the house himself, never went inside, just cashed the checks and filed the paperwork. The DNA results came back last week. The hair samples belong to a close biological relative of mine. Not distant, close. I am back in my apartment now, had the locks changed the day I got home, installed a security chain on the inside of my front door. Koda will not stop growling at the coat I wore inside that house. It is still hanging on the hook by my door, and I cannot bring myself to touch it or move it. I do not know who was in that basement. I do not know where they are now. I do not know if they know my name or my face or where I live. All I know is that they share my blood and that my family built a system designed to keep them buried, a system engineered to outlive every single person who knew the truth. And it almost worked. Hello, it's me. Your dog growling at the coat honestly scares me more than the basement. Dogs do not just do that. Whatever was down there left something on you. On to the next one. I, 31 male, just found out my family has been talking to me on the phone every Sunday for 5 years. I never called them once. Posted by Spencer Through the Walls on r/no-sleep 3 days ago. 5 years of silence, or so he thought. So I need to get this out somewhere because I have been sitting in my car in a parking lot for 2 hours and I cannot go back inside my apartment right now. My name is Spencer. I am 31, I work as a copywriter, and I live alone in a quiet suburb outside Portland. Have for about 5 years now. I moved out here after a bad fallout with my family. My mother Diane, my older brother Nolan, my younger sister Kira. I do not want to get into what the fight was about. What matters is I left and I barely looked back. A text on Christmas, maybe a happy birthday if I remembered. That was it. So when Diane's 65th birthday came around last weekend, I figured I had been enough of a stranger. I drove the 4 hours home, and they were happy to see me. Not just happy, warm, like I had never left. Kira hugged me at the door and said it was good to finally see my face instead of just hearing my voice. I laughed it off. Then at dinner, Diane started talking about our Sunday calls, how much she looks forward to them, how I had told her about the difficult client who keeps rejecting headlines, how I described rearranging my living room last fall, how I cried on the phone in March when my cat passed. All real. All things that happened to me. I never told a single one of them any of it. I smiled and nodded because what else do you do? I figured they were confusing me with Nolan or mixing up some group chat I forgot about. Then Diane said, "Hold on, I saved the sweetest voicemail from last Sunday." She pulled out her phone, hit play, and held it up to the table like she was showing off a grandchild's drawing. It was my voice. Not someone who sounded like me, my voice. My exact cadence. The way I clear my throat mid-sentence. My stupid little laugh after making a joke about a client who wanted the copy to sound more like a hug. I was home alone last Sunday. I did not pick up my phone. I did not call anyone. I did not record that message. The whole table was smiling at me. Diane had tears in her eyes, and I just sat there. He could not feel his hands. Spencer needed answers. He started with his own phone. I excused myself from the table before dessert, told them I needed air, locked myself in the upstairs bathroom and scrolled through my call history going back months. Then I checked the full log through my Carrier app. 5 years of Sundays. Not a single outgoing call to any of them. No voicemails sent. Nothing. I washed my face and went back downstairs. I tried to be casual about it. Asked Kira what we talked about 2 Sundays ago. She said I told her I had switched to oat milk because regular milk was messing with my stomach. That is true. I did switch, but I never told anyone. It was a nothing decision I made alone in my kitchen on a Tuesday. Then Diane brought up how I had complained about my landlord raising the rent back in January. Also true. Also something I only ever muttered to myself while reading the email. I looked at Nolan. He was leaning back in his chair, picking at the label on his beer bottle. I asked him what we usually talk about on the calls. He shrugged. Said mostly the same stuff. Work and life, nothing special. Then he changed the subject. But I caught him watching me across the table a few seconds later. Not suspicious exactly, more like he was measuring something. I stayed the night in my old bedroom, did not sleep. I kept replaying that voicemail in my head. The voice did not just sound like me. It knew things that I had never posted online, never texted, never told a living person. Things I said out loud in my apartment to no one. The rent complaint, the oat milk, the way I talked about my cat in March. I cried alone on my kitchen floor and told the empty room I was sorry I did not take him to the vet sooner. Whoever this was, they were not guessing. They were listening. I drove back to Portland the next morning. Spent the week trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Then, on Thursday, I called Kira. Kept it light. Asked what Sunday me had been up to lately. She laughed and said I sounded off. Then she said something that has not left me since. You were usually funnier on Sundays. The other Spencer was better at being him. Spencer decided to set a trap. I started keeping a notebook. Every single thing I said out loud in my apartment, I wrote down. Date, time, exact words. I talk to myself a lot. Always have. Living alone does that. But now I was doing it on purpose. I invented a coworker named Dale. Talked about him like he was real. Complained about Dale leaving his lunch in the office fridge. Dale taking credit for my headline. Then I mentioned a trip to Tucson I was supposedly planning for the fall. None of it was true. I just needed to see if it would come back to me. 2 Sundays later, I called Kira. Kept it casual. Asked what we chatted about last week. She said I had been venting about some guy at work named Dale and that I was excited about a trip to Tucson. My hands were shaking when I hung up. Something in my apartment is listening to me. I tore the place apart, checked every outlet, every vent, pulled light fixtures off the ceiling, ran my hands along the baseboards. Nothing. I have not been sleeping well. My copywriting work is slipping because I sit at my desk in silence now, afraid to speak. The apartment feels like it has an audience. And I keep coming back to one thing. Nolan visited about 18 months ago. He drove all the way out to Portland, which he had never done before, stayed one night, and he insisted on replacing 3 smoke detectors, said mine were outdated and it was a fire safety issue. I thought it was nice. I thanked him. I have not checked those smoke detectors yet. I do not want it to be my brother. I really do not want it to be Nolan. Nocturnal Llama. The voicemail detail absolutely wrecked me. Hearing your own voice say things you never said is a kind of violation I cannot even wrap my head around. Wren and Finch. I work in speech synthesis, and the technology to do this convincingly over a phone line has existed for a couple of years now. The barrier is not capability, it is ethics. Your brother just did not have that barrier. Dead daisy chains. The cat detail is what got me. You never told anyone your cat died, and the fake you mentioned it to your mom the following Sunday. Nolan was listening to you grieve alone in your apartment. Yeah, I sat on my kitchen floor that night talking to her like she could still hear me. I said her name over and over. And then my mother called me 2 weeks later and said she was sorry about Mochi, that I had told her all about it. I had not told anyone. I thought I was losing my mind. Now I know Nolan heard every word of the worst night of my life and fed it to a program. The smoke detectors were still on the ceiling, waiting. Spencer finally checked the smoke detectors. I called my mother myself, and she asked for the other me. I unscrewed the smoke detector in my hallway last night, the one Nolan installed 18 months ago. There was a small device inside, not something you buy at a store, custom built, compact, with a tiny SIM card still transmitting. I sat on my hallway floor holding it for a long time. Then I called Nolan. He picked up on the second ring like he had been waiting. I asked him what was inside the smoke detector. Silence. A long one. Then he started crying. He told me everything. After I cut the family off 5 years ago, Diane fell apart. She stopped eating for a while. She would sit by the phone on Sundays waiting for a call that never came. Nolan works in audio engineering. He built a voice model of me, scraped my old social media posts and the few texts I still sent on holidays, trained it on clips of me talking from old family videos. He taught it my habits, the throat clearing, the way I laugh at my own jokes, the self-deprecating thing I do. At first, he guided the calls himself, feeding lines to the AI in real time. Then, the system got better and the calls became more autonomous. But Diane started asking specific questions. What was I working on? How was the apartment? Was I eating enough? The AI needed real material. So Nolan drove out to Portland and put recording devices in 3 smoke detectors while I was at work. For 18 months, every word I spoke alone in my apartment was captured and fed back into the model. My frustration about clients, my landlord raising the rent, me crying on the kitchen floor the night Mochi died, saying her name into the dark, apologizing for not taking her to the vet. Nolan heard all of it. He fed my grief into a program so it could grieve better than I did, on schedule, every Sunday at 3. I asked him how he could do that to me. He said he was not doing it to me. He was doing it for Diane. Throw me a bone. I keep thinking about the mom's dementia angle. Nolan is wrong for the surveillance, but I genuinely do not know what the right call is here. There might not be one. Salted wound. Nolan installed a bug in your apartment. Full stop. I do not care what his reasons were. That is a felony in most states. Throw me a bone. Legally, you are right, but imagine being Nolan, watching your mom forget everyone except the son who stopped calling. I am not saying it is justified. I am saying I understand why someone breaks that way. Love and violation, wearing the same face. There was one more thing Nolan had not told him yet. Diane has early onset dementia. Nolan told me on that same call, after a pause so long I thought he had hung up. She was diagnosed about a year ago. She has been declining fast. Most days she does not recognize Nolan. She does not recognize Kira. She barely knows where she is. But every Sunday at 3 in the afternoon, when the phone rings, something clicks. She picks up and she talks to her youngest son for 30 minutes, and she laughs and she is herself again. The AI version of me is the only thing she still holds on to. Nolan asked me not to take that away from her. I pulled the recording devices out of all 3 smoke detectors. I put them in a shoebox in my closet. I did not ask Nolan to stop the calls. I drove back to my apartment and sat in silence for a very long time. Then, the following Sunday, I picked up my phone at 3 in the afternoon and I called my mother. I tried. I really tried. I was warm. I asked about her garden. I made a joke about a difficult client. I cleared my throat the way I always do. I did everything the other me would have done. She listened for about a minute, then she went quiet. Then she said, "Spencer, you sound different today." I told her I was just tired. She said no. She said I did not sound like myself. Then she asked me when her real son was going to call. I said I was her real son. She said, "No, I mean the one who calls on Sundays. You sound like someone else." I did not know what to say. I still do not. Pale Curtain Kid. This is the most unsettling thing I have read on here in months, and there is not a single supernatural element. Just a brother with too much love and zero boundaries. Pale Curtain Kid. This is the most unsettling thing I have read on here in months, and there is not a single supernatural element. Just a brother with too much love and zero boundaries. The worst part is she is right. The version of me that calls on Sundays is more her son than I have been in 5 years. I do not know how to compete with something I built by abandoning her. Thanks for watching, and if these stories stay with you, subscribing is the best way to catch the next one.